Felicia
From the
Michaels,
moment
my
you hear his
princess,
voice, you
has
know
been entertaining
there are
audiences
problems.
with a unique
Joey
style
Coco Diaz has
of
been
provocative
rocking
humor
comedy
since the
stages for
90s,
15 years.
With her
You've seen him in
tongue-in-cheek,
films and
she's been
television,
exploring
but
such
his
topics
real
of the
repertoire,
dynamics
as
of
his
the
father
male-female
say, are the
relationships,
stories from
or
his
as we call
past
them here in
and
the
his
studio,
chaotic
dirty
views on
thoughts,
life that will make
and
this
the
podcast
proliferation
a different
of
beat.
the sensual
Raw
feminist.
pain and
She's a little
passion
firecracker
sound
rolled
really
up, and that's why I
describe
love
this
her, and that's why
Cuban-born,
you're going to love
New
listening. So
Jersey
tune in, all right?
Animal. Would you like to talk, Joey?
Greetings to all you podcasters in Podcastville. Welcome to Beauty and the Beast podcast, Felicia Michaels.
Joey Diaz.
How are you guys? I sound all fucking anal today. I don't know why.
Really? You're uptight? You got suddenly uptight.
No. I'm okay right now. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes you just go off tune, but it's great to be back. How are you, my love?
I am good.
It's a beautiful day to be alive, as usual.
It is a beautiful day to be alive. Although, I have to tell you that if the podcast were a human being, I would have a butter knife in my hand and I would stab its little eyes out. I would just pry the eyeballs right out of it, like make a little popping sound like bloop.
Like I said, I have a hard time returning the emails. I can't imagine editing this thing and putting the pieces together. And then every once in a while, the microphone pops and this goes off, so you can't hear my voice. It sounds like Mickey Mouse, so we can't really give you the whole story 9 out of 10 times. Yeah. But we're back, bitches.
We're back.
Felicia went out yesterday and got a whole new fucking system here.
I was like, fuck it.
Fuck it. And we're trying it out, and we're going to see how it works. And hopefully we'll keep the laughter and the stories flowing. You know what I'm saying, bitches? Great emails this week, but one really stuck out about a young man who had found out later in life who his dad really was. And he didn't know the circumstances of his dad's death and stuff like that.
Really
cool
email. Yeah.
He's an older gentleman, not even an older gentleman. He's a man, you know. But it's so funny how I found out as a kid what my dad had really died from. Like, I thought about his situation in my eyes. Like the week before, we spoke about sometimes you have to see a problem before you know. You have to see pain, somebody else's pain, before you see how your pain was. And that was one of those emails this morning. That's why we urge you to send emails, because they'll get us talking a lot more and shit. It was so funny because I always thought my dad died of a heart attack, at 37. And then one day I go to Miami and my godfather tells me, oh, no, he died doing heroin. And I was fucking, my head was about to blow up because there was no conniving. There was no holding back. He just said it to me. Right. But he also told me the story, how much he loved my father. And, he felt guilty the rest of his life because my father was dead. He wasn't. They got to make money. But it was so weird. Like, I went home and started looking through all the boxes. And I found all these articles about my dad in the obituary, and none of them said nothing about heroin. And they wrote this half-page ad that was about how he was the first Cuban committeeman, how he had a child and all this shit, and he suffered a heart attack. So they all lied. Like, all these people had lied because he was the first Cuban committeeman, and they didn't want people to find out that, this is what the first Cuban guy died from or something.
Right.
So they all masked it. Years later, not even, my mother died 15 years later. I go to get my insurance money from my father, from the Rock, Prudential, and they're like, no, there was no death certificate ever signed. And it was just mind-boggling on me for years. That was part of the pain also. Right. That was part of my lashing out also, that Jesus fucking Christ. Not only did my mom die, my dad dies, but then I can't even get the fucking cash because he didn't sign his death certificate because he's fucking around with drugs. Then to make it worse, I couldn't collect on my mother's Social Security because she never worked under her real name. She always worked under an alias all those fucking years. So, but that had nothing to do with it. It was just the thought that sometimes you get mad at your parents for doing something. You find out later in life. He said he was mad at his mom. Yeah. And it's like sometimes moms do things or parents do things for our best interest, like for our best interest not to drive you fucking crazy, Right. I have a friend that was adopted. He didn't know until he was 18, and he went fucking nuts when he found out. And I had to bring him off the ledge a couple times, like talk to him and say, hey, man, what difference does it make? You lived 20 years of your life with these people. It was all fun and games, and all of a sudden you found out something. Look how you're fucking acting. I feel your pain. I feel your pain that you want to know who that is, who your mother was, what really happened. But in the long run, who cares? You're fucking alive.
Right.
You're happy, It's very weird, all those questions, especially when you doubt your parents. Like, it's something to do with your parents, that they might have lied to you and shit. You lose your mind. That fucks with you for years,
My mother was born in Berlin, Germany in 1940, and my grandmother had married a gentleman who was a little wealthy, but was a lot older on his third wife. And my grandmother kind of told me that the only reason she married him is because she thought, other than him having money, that he'd never want to have sex. But he was apparently
a fucking savage.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do?
So her plan backfired. But so my mother was the second baby with those two. But it turns out that he wasn't the parent to my mother. Yeah. So
your grandmother cheated on him.
I guess so, but because he was like 82 when my mom was born, but my grandmother was like 30. You know what I mean? And,
so your grandmother was the original Nicole Smith.
Well, yeah. Yeah, but
your grandmother was the original Nicole Smith in Germany.
Yeah.
Hey, man, who gives a fuck? It happened. It's the truth. What are you going to do?
What happened in 1930 happened in 1930.
And your grandmother was smart because she said, fuck it, I'm going to marry this guy. There ain't no Viagra. He's going to have dead dick. And realize that, there's that button in your asshole that you press that gives you just as good as a hard-on as Viagra or Cialis. Mm-hmm. And he went nuts. I'm sorry to say this about your family. You're looking up around like, Jesus Christ, I can't believe this is happening.
No, I'm like, wow, I'm really sharing a lot.
Your grandmother was a freak.
You know what?
That's good to know.
She was a freak. But that affected my mother. I found out my mother never knew. And then my mother, had a lot of problems, she was institutionalized when she was 18. She was always very sickly because she internalized fucking everything. Look, she was going to be sickly anyway. But it really fucked her up. And she got addicted to, drugs and got off of it.
Did she ever meet the guy?
Was in a wheelchair.
Anybody ever meet the guy?
No, because he was like from what I understand, he was a soldier.
Soldier?
He was a soldier, yeah, and it was during the war. It was at the very beginning of the war, 1940, right before it. But then I remember my aunt told me. Now I realize my mother's half sister, and my mom was like this 5'10", blonde-haired, blue-eyed chick, and everyone around them was like 4'8" with brown hair and brown eyes. You know what I mean? It
was obvious.
It's obvious. It's obvious. It's a weird thing because I remember when my aunt told me, and we were at a lunch, and this is like 7 years or so after my mother died. And she told me, and I just started crying because to me it was like, this was the key to me understanding my mother. You know what I mean? It was like someone just gave me the key, and it's fucking overwhelming. And so I can't imagine if you're actually the person going through that. You know what I mean? Where you think something is the truth, and then you've been lied to your whole childhood.
It's amazing when you find that key. The same thing with me. I didn't know any fucking keys. And last year I'm having lunch with my uncle, and he says to me, did your mother ever tell you about your grandparents? And I'm like, no. And they're like, do you know that your grandparents are second cousins? Like third cousins or something, but they're cousins.
Right.
And I'm like, no, that explains why I'm fucking retarded. You know what I'm saying? That explains a lot of shit. You know what I'm saying? Right there at that lunch.
Is this on your mother's side or your father's side?
This is on my mother's side.
Oh, yeah.
Here's on my mother's side. That family's fucking nuts. But now you come to think of it, how, it's just amazing how when I was a little boy, I met both my grandmothers. I didn't meet my mother's mother, but I met her family. Mm-hmm. I would meet her family, and then I'd meet my grandparents from my father's side. Jesus Christ. They're from Spain. They have the accent. No podemos estar dile. They speak very proper. When I would curse, their fucking faces would turn white. That's where I get this really white skin from.
Yeah.
These dumb motherfuckers. The Diaz's, they're a bunch. They're a brand that, the Diaz's don't even shit on a toilet. You follow me? If you talk to the Diaz's, they don't shit in the toilet. My mother destroyed his life. It was one of those families.
Right.
But then you see my mother's side of the family. They're stabbing each other. They're all fucking crazy. Well, they never stabbed each other. My mother stabbed somebody to get out of Cuba. But I'm sitting there with my uncle last year at fucking the pastrami place. And we're having a great lunch. And you know what? I didn't talk to my uncle for 25 fucking years, And all of a sudden, these are things that I want to know,
But wasn't it because of a drug deal that went down bad?
What?
That you didn't talk to your uncle?
No, I didn't talk to my uncle because I tried to rob him.
That's what it was. Like he doesn't tell you the whole story.
In 84, I told the story.
I know.
I told the fucking story that, but again, it was like when I came out, he was breaking my balls, but that gave me no reason to try to rob him or whatever. But we're eating a pastrami sandwich and coleslaw. The place is packed. And he goes, I don't know if your mom ever told you. Do you know your grandmother and your grandfather are like third cousins? And I was like, who cares? Now, listen, if I didn't know about life the way I know about life now, I would have made a big deal about it. I would have gone to the bar and drank for 2 hours. I can't believe it. I would have gone on history.com and gone online and looked up fucking cousins that get married. And I said to myself, what am I going to do? It happened. What do you want me to fucking do? I wasn't there. It was 80 goddamn years ago. I'll tell you who else is inbred. Paul motherfucking Castellano.
Oh, really?
The mobster? Fuck yeah. All those Sicilians and shit are inbred. Because that's what you do. Cousins get married with cousins. But they were real fucking cousins. Paul Castellano's mother married like Gambino's uncle. I mean, something fucking just like crazy. And they lived with it and everything is fine. And so everything's all right. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Every once in a while I get a sudden urge to get on a short bus, but sometimes it happens. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
What are you going to do?
What are you going to
do? They say that when that happens, like I read about a little bit, that it just throws off certain things and your addictions are a little stronger, which I'm seeing it. That was the fucking key for me.
Right.
So if you're listening to this tonight at the dinner table, ask your mother or grandma, give me the key to this fucking family. Who did you fuck? You know what I'm saying? Who did you fuck? Break it down for me. Let's give thanks and prayer. I remember one time going to Miami with my mother, and I don't know if I told the story on here, but there was a big party, and we have a party. Also, my mother comes in the room, and she's like, look, pictures from Cuba. Did I tell you about this? She goes, look at all these pictures. Your sister's in these pictures. And she takes the fucking thing off the picture, and it's all black people. Not Cuban tan skin with the blue eyes, the good-looking Cuban you dated in Miami. His skin was so beautiful. No. These motherfuckers were black, Jack. And I looked at my mother, and I go, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. These ain't my people. And I just walked away, and she nearly killed me. She gave me a back smack to the back of the head. Get in the fucking room. How dare you say that about your family and all this shit. I'm like, fuck these motherfuckers. They're all dark. They ain't related to me. Something happened there. Don't ever show me that picture again, And then like a week later, she told me the whole story. She goes, in Cuba, the slaves came. So some of the women fucked around with the black guys. And this is what happened. All your cousins are black now through generations and shit. You see my cousin, you met my cousin at the wedding. She's fucking dark skinned. My uncle's dark skinned as fuck.
Family secrets. Family fucking secrets. What's the biggest family secret that you have?
I think the one that bothered me the most ever was the one when, I think you cut this from the thing. That the story that I never ever told anybody and held on to real close to my heart, and then something happened that really triggered, was when my father, my stepfather, and my mother got into that fight, savage style, where she hit him in the head with the Saint, and he hit her in the head with the Shalimar. And when I pulled up in the car, when you're a kid and you're 10, and there's your mom outside, covered in blood, but smoking a cigarette with an ice pack through her head, and you're like, what the fuck? You're a kid. I ran out of there and I went to hug my mother, and next thing you know, he comes around the corner with a fucking knife, and the kid I'm with pushes him off, and they break it up, and my mother's like, you know what? Never is a man ever going to touch me again, That story always bothered me because it seemed like it was 2 hours. It was from 3 o'clock. We had her back home at 5, and she was stitched up or whatever they did to her. But it seemed like a whole fucking night, and I always never told anybody that story because it really told what the fuck my family was about. They were fucking savages, You don't see All in the Family, fucking Edith doesn't hit Archie in the head with a fucking saint. A saint!
Right.
A Catholic saint!
Right.
And then he hits her in the head, nicked her with a bottle of Shalimar. If he would have really hit her with the Shalimar, she would have still been dead that night,
Yeah.
But it's so weird. That was one of the dirtiest fucking things I kept inside for years because it was such a horrible story,
Yeah.
And then one night I just realized that it was me. It was who I was about. That was my mother sticking up for herself. He flicked a cigarette at her.
Yeah.
And she fucking hit him in the head with it. And then on the way back from the hospital, I remember her shirt still covered. They gave her like some gown to wear, and she looked at me and she was like, never again will that motherfucker ever lay his hand on me.
Right.
That was the moral of the story. Never mind the hospital and the cigarette and all this shit. That was the moral of the story.
Right.
Like, it didn't matter to me what the fuck the situation was. This motherfucker wasn't getting away with it. And then, I seen Juan beat up on people. I seen Juan shoot a guy. I seen Juan do all these things. Let me tell you something. The next day, Juan took everything out of that house. He didn't dare to stay because he seen her real what she was about. He was like, you're not doing this in my house. And That's how I got to talk about it, because I seen what the story was really about.
Right.
But at first, when I was 20, I would never repeat that story because it sounded like a fucking animal.
Right. No, there are,
That's fucking animals.
Yeah,
Your mother did what?
Yeah.
Are you fucking kidding me, guy? And then afterward, you look at it and you're like, oh, that thing she told me in the car, that always came to mind.
Right.
Very interesting, your family, what they give you to work with. And some people fight it.
Right.
I will never fight it because it's who the fuck we are. Why are you fucking fighting it? Why are you fucking fighting it?
Right.
If your mother was a dick sucker and your grandmother was a dick sucker, if the apple don't fall far from the tree, you're a dick sucker. But if you're going to start going to CA meetings, Cocksuckers Anonymous meetings, and saying, I don't want to suck dick no more, and I'm just using this. It could be for anything. It could be for anything. We've discussed this before. If you see your parents do drugs, you're most likely, 60%, you're going to do drugs because your hero has done drugs. If your father stabs people, 60%, you're going to stab people because...
But that can go the other way. Like this is one of my, I never told people this for a long time, but my mom, my mom could run away with herself. You know what I mean? She was one of those people in the sense of like, sometimes, like I remember when I was a little girl, I must have been 11 or 12, and my mom remarried this young man, my stepfather, and he was like 12 years younger than her. So he was like 23. 22,
so your mother
23.
was in a wheelchair at this time?
No, this is before she was in a wheelchair, because my mom was a pretty woman. And so one time he ran into my room, and he's like, there's something wrong with your mom. And I go into my mom's room, and my mom's like, who is this child, Daddy? I don't understand what this child is and what's going on. Like, she was this other person, right? And I just remember, like, because he was freaking out. And I just remember, like, looking at my mom like, oh, really, dude? This is how you're going to play it? You know what I mean? Like... I was just looked up at him like, you're on your own.
So what was she doing?
She was just trying to fuck with him, I guess. I don't know. People, you know what? I have this friend, and she told me this story once about her brother that when he flew to a city once and everyone got off the plane, he refused to get off the plane. They had to call the cops, and the cops came and they surrounded him and they jumped him and they drug him off the plane. But right before they jumped on him, he was like snarling at them like a dog and just like barking and wanting to bite. Right. And then and then she asked him later when she went to go visit him in the insane asylum, like, why did you do that? And he's just like, sometimes you just got to know what it's like to bark like a fucking dog.
Yeah, fuck
and you know what? And it's like, but so that's how I think about my mom when she did that. Like, that's what she, some people just can run away with themselves like that,
It's fucking crazy, the shit you remember from your childhood and how it really all affects you.
Oh, absolutely.
It all affects you. Like, everything affects you. And as you're doing something, you see that day. You go back to that day where you're like, that's what happened to me then. Look how it fucked with me now.
If you would like to email us,
That's right.
Email us at beautyandthebeastpodcast@gmail.com. We do answer the email. Sometimes it takes a little longer than others, but and we enjoy it, and we love hearing from you guys. And
we learn.
We
learn what to talk about. You guys give us fuel. So if you have a situation, if you're licking some girl's feet when she's coked up, I could help you a little bit because I've been there. You know what I'm saying? But if you don't want me to talk about it, then... But if you have something that you genuinely don't mind sharing with us, and we won't mention your name just to talk about it, how it affected our life, how this same situation has affected our life, please email us.
Email us. We'd like to hear from you. And also a word from our sponsor.
That's right. SkinIndustries.com. A leader in athletic apparel. We got good news. By the time this podcast is up, you could probably go to SkinIndustries.com and order the official Beauty and the Beast shirt.
Yeah, and we have a link right on the front of the page that'll lead you right to it. And
we only got 100 of them, so it's limited supplies only for our favorite fucking people. So get it together. Don't dick around. Order now.
You know, Joey, you have your phone next to your balls in the Cuban egg roll all day. You don't think they're getting something goofy going on? Come on now.
What do you want me to do? Buy a bracelet, put a 50-cent piece in my pocket, put a copper thing on my feet so the blood goes to my dick? Enough already. Enough. I do inversion yoga positions. That's good enough. You know what I'm saying? I put my feet up. What are you going to do? You try to do what you do. We're back, though, you know?
Yeah.
Last week when we were here, we this is why the podcast last week was so short, because one of the days the wiring was fucked up.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
So we couldn't use those pieces, and we had to think about what we were talking about. And one of the things that Felicia reminded me was a couple of weeks ago we were doing a podcast, and Felicia said that, you know, she didn't say it in a rude way. She said it that, you know, in that period of my life, whatever decision I was always making with drugs in my system, which is always very bad. And it is bad because you always have that doubt, and it's the drugs that give you that doubt. And it's funny that I had a job at the Galaxy Towers, and this is probably 1984, in the heyday of cocaine. I went back home, left Colorado like an asshole that I was, and went home. And I went to one of my buddies, and I said, I need a job. And he got me a job as a union stock clerk in a building. It's called the Galaxy Towers in Guttenberg, New Jersey. And it's 3 big towers, whatever, maybe 40 floors, maybe 30. I can't remember what it is right now. And underneath, it was one of the first buildings that they didn't want you to leave the building. They were going to build the building, so you have a dry cleaner, a movie theater, a bar, you know, a gym equipment.
Right,
they have everything there. And that was the original thing of it. That was the original prototype. Now they have them in Marina Del Rey, where you don't have to leave, you know, those big buildings there. And I guess that the Galaxy was a little prototype. But to get to the fucking story, Joey, I took this job, and at first I had to be in there at 7:30, and there was like a little window, and I had an office, and contractors would come in that were doing contracting in the 3 buildings and order pieces from me. And the first week I didn't know what was going on. I was on the up and up. And then one day somebody came to me, and they're like, you don't know how this building works. Everything we order, we get 2 of. Just build a fucking building, and then you get a kickback. So it was just this, like, amazing thing. Like, what are you saying? Like, people are telling me to steal.
Right.
So I'm like, I have to steal? And they're like, bro, we didn't call it that, but just figure it out. Everything we get from you, you get 2, so you have a back supply, and then we'll buy it from you, whatever. I'm like, fine. So this goes on for a couple of months. But before that, one of the guys was into blow. And he starts trading me blow. So I would get there at 7 in the morning, and this guy's already in a fucking grinder. I had never seen anything like that, with big eyeballs. And he had kids. And he would drive home, drive his kids to school, and then go there and start bumping. And by lunchtime, they were drinking. I could get weed there. We used to have board meetings every morning. Like, they come into the thing, and we'd smoke pot back there. And then I had keys to the building, you know, because sometimes you're bored. So the contractors are like, hey, bro, if you're bored, you want to make $20, stock the job. So, you know what, sometimes if I like the contract, it wasn't about money. I just walked the air conditioning unit up, and I started looking at these apartments. I'm like, oh my God, here I am, I'm a savage at the time, you know, and I'm like, you know what, one thing I do, I know you don't shit where you sleep, you know.
Right.
And then I started finding out that people in the building were coke dealers. All that whole Boulevard East is all drug dealers at that time. It was the 80s. They were Colombians. But Ken Griffey lived there from the...
because it was pretty close to the city.
It was pretty close to the city.
Right.
So, like, Dave Winfield lived there. I seen a couple of athletes there, and people from soap operas lived there and stuff like that. But one night, I went into this... I would get coked up and go back to the building, and I always thought that somebody was a drug dealer. And, like, I'd see somebody, and I think they were a drug dealer. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to go into their apartment when they leave town, or when somebody's doing work on them. And this just went on and on and on, and it was just this. I was making too much money there, and I was bartending at night. So here I am. I have a great union job at night, but I had this job in the daytime, and it was just too much. And you're saying, Joey, what do you mean too much? It was 40 hours, but I was making like $800 a week paperwork-wise, and then I was making like $2,000 a week cash. And on top of that, I had all the drugs I wanted, and now I'm getting keys to apartments.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Which is even worse.
Right.
And one day, I went into this apartment, and it wasn't Santeria. It was like this Hindu stuff. You know, it was like this Tibetan stuff with people bowing and shit. And I think they had coke in there or something, and I took it, and I just felt, it was just fucking horrid, you know? And I remember that I said, that's it, I'm going to quit this job. And I went, and I gave my notice, and people were saying to me, you were making so much money. Even the kid I just called before, I said, remember when I worked at the Galaxy Towers? He goes, I remember, it was like a fucking party. But I remember that even under all that, I just felt a bad energy in this building.
Right.
Like, I always knew something was going to go down there, either with me or something.
Right.
Let me get the fuck out of here now.
No, you have to. When you sense something like that, you have to.
If it's too easy. And guys, you ever go to a bar and you meet a girl and everything falls into place and it's just about to work out. She's just about to give you the pussy. And then there's by the way, there's a husband. It was too easy. When it's too easy, there's going to be a by the way at the end. So I quit this job and, you know, I took my losses, and I still stayed friends with the guys. And when I was growing up, when I was a kid, my mother was good friends with this guy. I mean, great friends with this guy named Tati. His name was Andre Garcia. And he kind of raised me in a way. He would pick me up and take me into the city and get me these expensive haircuts. And he gave me a capsule full of Coke when I was in the 6th grade.
Oh my
and
God.
he told me to put it in a girl's pussy if you ever got older. I mean, this is where I got this shit from. I'm a fucking,
Right.
11-year-old kid.
Right.
And he had a thing, he was one of the first people to ever do drug rips. That first scene in Scarface where the drugs come and then you tell them you don't have money and you shoot them. He was one of the first people that were doing that. And as I was growing up, he did it to somebody really bad. And he brought this bad luck around, and my mom didn't want him around, and they got into a fight. But I loved him. I loved Tati because he was like my older uncle, He always took me to these weird places. He introduced me to his girlfriends. Well, years later, after I came out here and I was a man, Tati went into that building to do a drug rip.
Right.
And he kicked down the door, and he ended up shooting the Colombian's daughter.
Oh, really?
And her boyfriend.
To
Shot him dead. I killed him. He went in there to get drugs, and they were on the couch making out, and he just started shooting, and he shot them.
Wow.
And right there, that thing, I remember, I never knew about it because I wasn't in touch with him. I don't want people to think I was in touch with him. Once my mom died, I lost contact with him, but I went back to Jersey, and I seen one of the guys from the old school, and I said, brother, I'm Tati. And they said, you don't know? This idiot did a drug rip, busted into the Galaxy Towers, and started shooting and shot a girl, the Colombian's daughter, and the boyfriend, and he's doing 50 years. He died in the can,
Yeah.
But it was so weird that I always knew something bad was going to happen in that building. Even under my drug-induced, and in those days, I think back that I would have been more comfortable there. Like you just asked me, did you ever get laid there?
Right.
I remember everything, and I can't remember it. That's how uncomfortable that building made me.
Yeah.
It didn't. And I could have gone in there with broads and said, this is my apartment. It had a great view of the city, balconies. There's a disco upstairs. I could have done whatever I wanted to, but there was just something about that building that I always respected. I didn't care about the job. It was a union job. My friend got it for me as a handout, But it's amazing how even under the drug-induced, sometimes in life, something seems a little too easy.
Right.
And you catch
absolutely,
it.
Yeah.
You catch it. You always catch it. Before I left Jersey, one of the things that really got me to leave Jersey was that I was messing around with this guy that it was just too creepy. Like he would show up at 2, he'd buy drugs from you, and then he'd invite you back to his house. And then when you got back to his house, he had his own Coke. But he had jewelry, and he'd show it to you and take it out. It was like he wanted us to rob him.
Right.
You follow me? It was really weird. It was like he wanted something to happen. And one night I went up there, and it was just too easy. He was giving away grams of Coke and giving bumps to you and take a gram to go. And I remember I went home, and I said, I'm never going up there again. Something's just not right there. And that was in 83 when I moved to Colorado.
Right.
And a year later, I found out the guy was an undercover cop. And he had gotten shot, and had interviewed some of my buddies because they thought it had something to do with us in that bar. And I don't know what happened because I was never there. But it was really weird. Even then, I knew when something was too good to be true.
Oh, absolutely.
And even under my, and trust me, I'm the type of guy, when the drugs have you, they have you. You'll go anywhere to do coke. And even the last 10 years of my cocaine habit, the last 15 years, I never really did coke with a lot of people. I always did coke by myself, which is always scary.
As soon as you say Galaxy Towers, I totally envision how it must look, Like I totally...
3 towers.
Yeah.
3 buildings. That's it, next to a pool. And I got my arm ripped on the pool one time there. I tried to jump in the pool before I got a job there when I was in high school. And the barbed wire got me. That was about 4 years before that.
Oh, there was barbed wire around the pool?
I think around the pool, because it was right on Boulevard East, so you couldn't sneak in there. Boulevard East has a lot of action. If you guys have been listening to the podcast, Boulevard East is where I got beat up by the fag. Boulevard East is where the Hudson County Park
you gotta
is.
Say that word.
Whatever the fuck it is. Boulevard East is where the Martians land, right there, Hudson County Park.
Right.
And there's also the towers there. They call it the Grinder. I can't remember what the real name of the building is, and I've had some good times in there too. In that building. Yeah. That building had some. I had a friend that lived in that building. Lived in the 30th floor, and he was a coke dealer. And his name was Kurt. He was part of the DiLorenzo crew, the brother who lit the fucking fries on fire. Kurt was the real deal too. Kurt was a very intelligent kid that was an accountant and started selling drugs, and his whole world changed. He went from living with his mother to living on the 30th floor of this fucking building. But the psychosis and the paranoia got so bad with him that he would tie all his cocaine up with parachutes. So if the cops came, he would throw the parachutes out the balcony and then go downstairs and get it. Let me tell you about paranoia. He would grease his balcony. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, he would grease his balcony. And even though he lived on the 30th floor and it was impossible to get to his balcony, he would put grease on his balcony. If you went and stepped on his balcony, you'd slip and fall. Because that's how paranoid he was. Let me tell you something. When I seen his cocaine paranoia, I went back like in 86 one time to get coke to bring to Colorado. And somebody told me that Kurt wanted to see me. And I went over there. I had grown up with Kurt. I grew up with the whole family. And I went over there and I spent the night. And it was one of the craziest paranoia nights in my life. It was so much paranoia that I couldn't even do coke. I was entertained watching them. He would tie a string around his wrist and tie the other end of the string to the doorknob. So if somebody twisted the doorknob, he could feel it on his string. Okay? This time, like addictions are fucking crazy, but this is like a whole different thing of addiction. This night I spent up there was he had the rope around the wrist. He had the fucking balcony greased. He had the poles in the balcony greased. Not to mention, he had all the cocaine wrapped up in parachutes, ready to go out the window any minute. But he had a guy in the building that his name was Eugene that was going bald. And Eugene's paranoia, he wasn't paranoid. While he would do coke, he always thought two things. A, that you were doing the coke in front of him. And B, that he had bugs crawling all over him. This is classic. If you've never seen somebody who gets tweaked out and has bugs crawled all over him, get yourself a person. Put an ad in Craigslist. Pay for their cocaine and watch this shit. When people think bugs get on him, and he would be talking to you, and he was going bald. So part of his, like when you do coke or speed, you could feel like your scalp moving.
Right.
So every time he'd feel his scalp moving, he'd go, shh. And he'd look at his head, like through his eyeballs, like look up. And he'd try to smack his head like he thought there was a fly on there. And he would do this all fucking night. Like, hold on, Felicia. Shh. There's a bug on my cheek. There's no bug on your cheek, guy. All fucking night. And then he would be doing coke with you in the middle of a conversation. You go, hold on. Did you just do a line? No, we haven't done a line for an hour. No. There was more cocaine there, dog. Somebody did a line. And he'd start with you.
Right.
Like that was his thing. So there was two more lines there. Somebody did a line. Come on, empty your pockets. I remember going to the bathroom, coming out, and there was a girl like naked, crying. Like, well, I didn't do nothing. He's like, I know you got that cocaine on you. Give me the coke. It's between your toes. And she's like, I don't have anything. It was crazy. But to see him smack his forehead, Felicia, I never laughed so hard. And I don't give a fuck what ended up happening to him. I know his name was Eugene. I don't know what his last name was. But I never laughed so fucking hard with that.
Right.
Because I thought I was fucked up till I walked in there and seen this guy swatting at bugs that weren't around.
Right.
That's when you're really fucked up. That's a complete different level of paranoia.
Yeah.
And then they used to call him Buggy. And they used to break his balls and shit.
Oh, no, yeah.
And then they used to put little bugs on little pieces of paper on top when he was coked up to drive him crazy. You can't do that shit to people. You know what I'm saying? But this was a complete different level of paranoia. And then they would run out of coke and go downstairs to the garage to a dumpster, and the whole building was on coke. It just wasn't Kurt, Felicia. It was the entire 30th floor be knocking on your doors. Hey, can I borrow 3 beers? I never seen it. This was all night long. It was a long time ago. You know what I'm saying? Who the fuck knows? Don't get that. Listen.
But didn't you say something happened where a girl fell off?
At that building, years earlier, when I graduated high school, there was a kid named Chris Mullica, and he used to sell coke. And one night he beat us. We used to get these stolen Trinitrons, Sony Trinitrons in a box. And one night he beat me for a 60. He would always give us a gram of coke for a Sony Trinitron. So one night Ozzy Osbourne was performing out in the Meadowlands after Randy Rhoads died. And we're all going out there. We're excited. It's the guitarist from Night Ranger that's playing. We're all headed out there. We stop at Mullica's house with a TV. And he goes, I got you tonight. He goes, tonight I'm going to give you you're only going to get a half gram for the TV. And we're like, really, motherfucker? Okay. So we let him fuck with us, and I knew I would get this cocksucker. This was like April. In June one night, we went to his house to buy some coke, and while I was there, I go, can I take a pee? And I go to the bathroom. I go, I'm going to get this motherfucker. I left this bathroom window open. So I left with my buddy, and we waited till he left. We went drinking. I told my buddy about it. I hate that motherfucker. He's the one that robbed us that night during Ozzy Osbourne. I go, let's go down there. So I went around. I climbed in, let my buddy in. We couldn't find the fucking coke nowhere. We walked out of the house depressed, like with $200 or something. I said, hold on 1 second. I went back in there. Under the sink, there was a half ounce of rocks and little Tupperware containers Gone. Bingo. We stayed out from Friday night to Sunday. Monday, we're lifting in the garage, and he's knocking on the door. I know it's one of you guys that robbed us. And my buddy told him, get the fuck off the property before I snap your neck. He's a real skinny, like, cracky type of guy, you know? He came with, like, 3 other gorillas. We're like, get the fuck out of here before we beat you. Every time I go home, I bump into Chris Mulligan. And he'll come up to me and say, dog, that time you robbed that half ounce, I'm still paying that bill off. And you're like, stop, dog. But you're doing blow. You're still fucking skinny. So about 10 years ago, he was partying at that building, and some chick jumped off the balcony.
His balcony?
Like a balcony.
Right.
Like a 14th floor. Some chick jumped off a balcony.
Oh, yeah.
So they found out he was there. He's so skinny and scrawny. They went to his house and arrested him. But before they took him to the jail, they took him to the gym to make sure he could bench press like 100 pounds.
But that's like, how do you, that would be easy to fake. Like, I can't lift this.
Last week we went to UFC 126. And afterward, the Saturday night, we all met at Skirt Steak. And we all got steaks and whatever the fuck they have, crab cakes and clams. And on each dish, they give you a quarter of a huge garlic clove. Mm-hmm. And I love garlic. I think it's God's everything. You know, you look at these old Italians, they live to be 100. They drink garlic and fucking olive oil, and they eat garlic every day. And garlic surrounds vitamin C. I'm just a really big believer in garlic. So as we're talking, nobody wants their garlic, and I'm eating each fucking garlic clove off people's dishes. No shit, really. Did you see that punch to the neck? And I'm eating garlic. After about 5 or 6 garlic cloves, I don't even think about it. John Jones is having a party on the top floor of the Mandalay Bay. So we go in. The place is packed, but Joe's got pulled, so they say, go sit outside on the table. We're going to give you a table with bottles, but you got to sit outside. You know, at 11 o'clock at night, it's always cool, no matter where you're at, you know? So we got blankets. We're all sitting outside with red blankets on. It's Goldberg, his wife, just a bunch of crazy people out there, just talking about the UFC and stuff. And all of a sudden, I feel my stomach go like, boop. And I'm like, I got to fart so bad. And I had Red Band sitting next to me. Guys, I cracked the fucking fart. That was so bad, I could feel the warmth coming out of my ass. And all of a sudden, I just seen Red Band. His whole body shifted upward and flew. He's like, who the fuck was that? But Tate Fletcher was there. And everybody knows Fletcher. He eats these protein bars that have that chemical in them. And it smells like the inside of your stomach. This fart that I blew with the garlic was worse. Plus, it was laced with acid and banana bread from the fucking NOCC store. And I ate a pretzel at the fight. Plus, I had turkey for lunch. So it was just a condensed fucking fart, and I blew it. And Ari went upstairs to change because it was so cold. When he came back the next day at the airport, he goes, do you know I left for 20 minutes when I came back? The fart still smelled, and it was outside. That's what was coming out of my tear gas asshole. You follow me? I'm not proud to say it, but I got to share the story because they're going to hear it someday when we do the podcast anyway. The farts were so ferocious. The next day on the airport, they were still talking about it. After my mother died, we used to hang out at this pizza place called Nick's Pizza Place in North Bergen, New Jersey. Nick the Greek. Did I ever tell you about Nick? Nick the Greek was a bad motherfucker. Nick the Greek was an older guy who spoke with an accent, and he would give everybody a nickname. So my friend had a beard, so he used to call him Comeni. And then one night I got fucked up on Quaaludes and went in there, and he started calling me Belushi after that.
Oh, really?
He would call me Belushi, you're going to fucking die. Stop eating those pills. But I always had a tab with Nick. Nick was the Greek, and you always had a tab with him. And as I got older, Nick was kinky. You know, so I used to rob these construction sites, like for wood and stuff, and I'd tell Nick, and Nick would buy all the wood. I build garage, you know, whatever. He was always building something. But the one thing I used to do to Nick was I used to steal jewelry. People would bring me hot jewelry, and I'd say, take it to Nick. And I would go to Nick, sell him the jewelry, and he would put it in a napkin and wrap it and put it in an apron in the back. I never told you about Nick. And then 2 days later, I go back to Nick's, get a sandwich, and I go, Nick, let me use your bathroom. I'd steal the napkin back and take it. Then 2 days later, I come back and go, Nick, you want to buy some jewelry? I don't know, Belushi. That looks very familiar. I think I bought that the other day. I did this to Nick for like 3 fucking years until he caught on one day. Nick a friend of mine and I were talking about Nick because Nick was like our Arnold's. You know, everybody has an Arnold. Nick Pizzeria was on Arnold. But this kid I spoke to yesterday said that, like, I got Nick high a couple times, and it was classic because he looked just like Simon Bar Sinister from the cartoons.
Right.
And when you get Nick high, like if you smoke pot with Nick at 3, when you came back at 6, there was a sign on the door that said, gone, closed. And the next day you'd see him and you go, fucking speak. What did you put in that thing? It killed me. You know, like we would make him smoke pot all the fucking time.
Funny.
And he'd say, is that the same shit? No, Nick, this is hashish. Oh, I like hashish. And he'd smoke it, and 10 minutes later, we'd come back and fucking close. He had a cot in the back, and he had the Sicilian pizza that he put by the window. And what it really was like, you couldn't give those away. Nick had great pizza and great sandwiches, but the Sicilian he couldn't give away because we realized that it was a launch pad for the flies. Like flies would land on it from the window, or like before they were taking off, they would run across the Sicilian and get momentum, you know. So he'd always say, "Eat a Sicilian. I give Sicilian on the house." Nick, fuck that fly infested Sicilian. Sicilian on the house. Fuck you, Nick. And we would drive by. Nick, you suck in the car. And he'd put his finger out and go, "Fuck you, speak." And he'd go back into his pizza, and he'd call everybody a racial slur.
Right.
I have a buddy who's Italian. That's the cheapest man ever. And he would get a slice of pizza at Nick's, and then walk across the street and get an iced tea because across the street they were a nickel cheaper. And while he was walking across the street, Nick would pop out his head and go, "You fucking Jew!" People be driving by. What the fuck, Nick? Fuck you too. For that, he wouldn't say fuck you. He'd say fuck you.
Right.
He didn't know how to say fuck you. It was always fuck you. Nick is still there slinging pizza.
Wow.
I'm going to be out of high school 30 fucking years next year. And Nick is still there slinging pizza. And every time I go home, I drive by and I say, "Nick, fuck you. Fuck you, speak." I love you guys. Don't forget to send your emails to BeInTheBeastPodcast@gmail.com. Whether you want to send us problems, tell us we suck, whatever the fuck you want to tell us, tell us. And beside that, you know I love you. I want to give a shout out to Skin Industries. I want to give a shout out to Adam and Eve. I want to give a shout out to NOCC. Anywhere I go eat, I love you motherfuckers. Give him a kiss, please.
Mwah.
Stay black.